I thought my son invited me to dinner to make peace. Hours later, I watched him on a security camera, paying strangers to make sure I never walked out alive. Before I tell you how I uncovered my son's betrayal, take a second to hit that like button. It tells me you want more stories like this, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the bell, so you don't miss the moment where I finally take back control. I never thought I'd live to see the day when my own son became a stranger to me. For 63 years, I had faced life's battles head-on. I'd buried friends, worked until my hands cracked open, and carried the weight of responsibility like armor across my shoulders. Yet nothing, not the debts, not the loneliness, not even the pain in my chest that woke me some nights, hurt me more than losing Ethan. He was my only child, my blood, my legacy, and for years, everything I did was for him. I worked double shifts to pay his tuition. I sold the land my father left me just to cover his first home's down payment. When he stumbled with debts, I bailed him out quietly, protecting him from the wolves circling his door. I thought I was building his future brick by brick. Instead, I was just making him believe that my sacrifices were endless, that I would always bleed for him. But life has a cruel way of showing you the truth. Months passed without a word from him. The calls I made went unanswered. Birthdays slipped by like whispers in the dark. I told myself he was busy, that he'd come around. That time would heal the rift that had grown between us. So when he finally called, inviting me to dinner, I felt something I hadn't in years hoped. I arrived at the Maplewood Grill, a modest restaurant tucked between shuttered shops. The smell of roasted meat drifted through the air as I pushed open the door. And there he was, standing near the window, waving with that smile I used to know so well. "Dad," Ethan said warmly, wrapping me in a hug. His voice was steady, but his body felt rigid, like the gesture was rehearsed. Still, I let myself believe. We sat at a corner table. The chandelier above glimmered faintly, casting golden reflections on the polished wood. For a moment, it felt like the past, like all the bitterness and silence had melted away. He laughed as he brought up our old baseball games. "Remember when I hit that ball straight through Mrs. Jenkins' window?" He chuckled. I smiled, despite myself, and I had to pay for it. "You ran so fast, I swear you left me to take the blame." For a heartbeat, it was almost real again. Father and son, shared memories. But then his tone shifted. "Dad," Ethan began, fiddling with the edge of his glass, "I've been under a lot of pressure lately. You know, bills, mortgage, business not going the way I thought." He sighed, shaking his head dramatically. "I just need a little help, just until things turn around." The words hit me like déjà vu. I had heard them before, so many times before. Always dressed differently, always wrapped in excuses, but always the same. I stared at him. My fork felt heavy in my hand. "Ethan," I said slowly, "I've already given everything I could. There's nothing left for me to give." His smile faltered. A flicker of something darker crossed his eyes, resentment, maybe even contempt. It was gone in an instant, replaced by forced cheer. "Of course, Dad, I get it. I just thought, maybe we could have a drink, talk things out like old times." The rest of dinner passed in fragments. He laughed at memories, asked about my health, pretended to care. I wanted to believe him, but my gut twisted. The warmth in his voice felt shallow, practiced, like lines from a script. When we stepped outside, the night air was sharp, carrying the scent of rain. Ethan clapped me on the back. "Let's stop by the Rusted Anchor," he suggested, "for old time's sake. One drink before we call it a night." I hesitated. Something inside me whispered that I should go home, that this sudden nostalgia wasn't real. But his eyes, those same blue eyes I once rocked to sleep, looked at me with an almost pleading shine. And like a fool, I followed. The pub was dim, filled with the hum of muted conversations and the clink of glasses. Ethan excused himself, saying he needed to make a quick call, and disappeared toward the back. I slid onto a bar stool, trying to steady my thoughts. That Eswin the bartender, a stocky man with a weathered face, set a glass down in front of me. "First one's on the house," he said, voice low and knowing. His name tag read Martin. Something in his eyes unsettled me. He didn't look at me the way strangers usually did. His gaze lingered, sharp and cautious, like he was measuring whether to speak or stay silent. And when he finally leaned forward, his words made my blood run cold. "Sir, you need to be careful tonight. Your son, he's not here just to share a drink." I froze, Martin's words echoing in my head. "Your son, he's not here just to share a drink." My throat tightened. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Martin glanced over his shoulder, then leaned in closer. His tone dropped to a gravelly murmur. "Look, I've been tending this place for 20 years. You learned to read people, and your son? He's not here to mend fences. He's here to make sure you don't walk out alive." The room spun around me. My first instinct was to laugh it off, call it absurd. Ethan, my Ethan, the boy I once carried on my shoulders, who used to beg me to play catch until the sun went down. But Martin's eyes were steady. He wasn't joking, he wasn't mistaken. I shook my head. "That's impossible." Martin reached under the counter and pulled up a small monitor connected to the pub's security feed. He tapped the screen with a calloused finger. "See for yourself." I turned, and my heart shattered. On the grainy black and white footage, Ethan sat in the back booth. He wasn't on the phone like he claimed. He wasn't even alone. 3 men surrounded him, hard faces, leather jackets, the kind of men who lived in shadows. Ethan leaned forward, whispering, his eyes darting around. And though the camera didn't capture every word, enough slipped through to seal the truth. "Tonight, alley behind the pub. Quick, no mistakes." One of the mental scar running down his cheek, nodded and tapped 2 fingers against the table. "Payment confirmed." I felt my stomach drop. My own son, my flesh and blood, was orchestrating my death like it was just another business deal. Martin's jaw clenched. "Those men, that's Connor, Vance, and Leo. I know their type. Once they take a job, they don't leave it unfinished." My hands shook against the bar. "But why?" I muttered, though the answer was already clawing at the back of my mind. Money, always money. He wanted the scraps I had left, the house, the insurance, maybe even the illusion of freedom without me in the way. Tears threatened, but fear shoved them back down. I couldn't afford to grieve. Not now. Sir Martin said firmly, "You've got 2 choices. Sit here and wait for them to corner you, or slip out before they realize you know. But if you're going to survive tonight, you need to move now." I swallowed hard, forcing air into my lungs. "Where's the back?" Martin jerked his chin toward a hallway. "Restroom, window leads into the alley across. It's tight, but it'll get you clear." I pushed myself off the stool, legs trembling. As I made my way toward the restroom, every step echoed like a countdown. My mind raced back to every sacrifice I had made, every sleepless night, every dollar handed over, every dream set aside for Ethan. And this was my reward. Inside the restroom, the flickering light buzzed above. I pressed my ear to the thin wall. Voices seeped through, low, dangerous, unmistakable. Connor's deep growl. "We'll wait until the old man stumbles out." One jab in the ribs, a shove into the street. "Car won't stop in time. Looks like an accident." Vance chuckled. "Easy payday. Kid wants it done quick. Doesn't even want the body bag." "Cold, huh?" Leo spat. "Doesn't matter. A job's a job." My chest tightened. They were already planning my death down to the smallest detail. And Ethan was the architect. I staggered to the small window above the sink. My fingers fumbled with the rusty latch until it snapped open. Cold night air rushed in, biting my skin. I hoisted myself up, groaning as my old joints screamed in protest. The alley outside was narrow, lined with dumpsters and shadow. I swung one leg through, then the other, and dropped onto the wet pavement. My palms scraped raw, but I didn't stop. I pressed against the wall, listening. The pub door creaked open behind me. Footsteps, heavy, deliberate. Connor's voice again. "He's still here. I can feel it." My heart hammered. I held my breath, pressing deeper into the shadows. For the first time in my life, I felt like prey hunted, disposable, seconds away from erasure. I slipped down the alley, shoes splashing in shallow puddles. The cold gnawed at me, but adrenaline pushed me forward. Every sound, every laugh from the street, every clink of glass from the pub felt like death closing in. When I finally reached the corner, I dared one last glance back. Through the window, I saw Ethan lift his glass, clinking it against Connor's with a smirk. My son, my betrayer, my executioner. The night swallowed me as I fled, alive but hollow. I didn't know where I was running, only that I had to. But one thing crystallized sharper than the fear in my veins. Ethan thought he had already won. He had no idea his old man still had fight left in him. The highway stretched before me like an endless ribbon of black, punctuated only by the glow of headlights from passing trucks. My old Ford hummed beneath me, steady as ever, the same vehicle Ethan had once begged me to teach him how to drive. He was 16 then, grinning ear to ear as he ground the gears and cursed at the clutch. Back then, I thought those were the hardest battles we'd fight, teaching patience, teaching responsibility. Now, he was paying men to take me out, men who spoke of my life as casually as discussing tomorrow's weather. The steering wheel creaked under my grip. I forced myself to loosen it before I snapped the leather covering. My chest ached, not from age, not from strain, but from the sheer weight of betrayal pressing down. 40 minutes down the I-5. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I let it ring once, twice. The screen lit up with Ethan's name. I didn't answer. It rang again and again. By the 10th call, I switched it off and tossed it onto the passenger seat. Whatever lies he planned to spin, whatever manipulation he had rehearsed, I wouldn't hear it. Not tonight. Instead, my mind wandered back to Martha, my wife, my anchor. She'd passed 3 years earlier, cancer taking her in cruel increments. Piece by piece, until all that was left was a whisper of the woman I loved. I could still hear her voice if I closed my eyes. Soft, firm, the voice that had carried me through lean years and long nights. "Don't let him take advantage of you, Daniel," she'd warn whenever Ethan came around with another request. Love doesn't mean blindness. Love means protecting yourself, too. I hadn't listened. I thought I was doing right by my boy. Sacrifice now, I told myself, and someday he'll repay it with love. What a fool I had been. By the time the Portland skyline emerged, I'd made a decision. Ethan had already signed his contract with betrayal, but Lucinda, his wife, was still an innocent in this. She had no hand in the deal I overheard, and if Ethan was reckless enough to put her in danger for money, then it fell on me to protect her. I pulled into my driveway a little after 3 a.m. The house sat quiet, shadows stretching across the yard. Inside, the air smelled faintly of dust and machine oil remnants of my shop work. I dropped my bag by the couch and collapsed into the armchair Martha used to claim as her own. The silence pressed in, broken only by the ticking clock on the mantel. I stared at the framed photo of us from years back, Martha holding Ethan as a boy, both laughing at some joke I couldn't remember. My chest tightened. How had we gone from that image to this nightmare? I poured myself a glass of whiskey, hands shaking as the amber liquid sloshed. The burn steadied me, though it couldn't numb the ache. I needed clarity, plans, options. Ethan had given me a deadline without even realizing it. Tomorrow night at 8. When the hitman would strike. That was my window. Do I run? Pack up, vanish, start fresh somewhere? Ethan would never think to look. The thought was tempting, but cowardly, and it wouldn't stop him. Those men would still be out there, paid and eager. Lucinda would still be in danger. No, running wasn't survival, it was surrender. And I wasn't ready to surrender. I stood, pushing aside the empty glass. My reflection in the window startled me. The man staring back wasn't just a weary mechanic or a grieving widower. He was the same soldier who had once huddled in foxholes, counting down artillery fire in Korea. The same man who'd built a life from nothing with calloused hands and stubborn will. Ethan thought I was weak because I was old, but old doesn't mean helpless. Old means experienced. Old means patient. Old means I know how to fight in ways he hasn't even imagined. I grabbed a notepad from the kitchen drawer and began to write. Lists steadied me. They turned chaos into action. Step 1. Warn Lucinda. She needed to know enough to get herself safe, but not so much that she'd run to Ethan. She loved him. Despite everything, love made people blind. I'd seen that in myself too many times. Step 2. Document everything I'd overheard. The names, the plans, the timeline. If I went down, the truth needed to outlive me. Step 3. Prepare my defenses. My shop wasn't just a place for tune-ups and oil changes. It was a fortress of tools, metal, and grit. A place I knew like the back of my hand. If they wanted a fight, I'd choose the battlefield. The clock ticked past 4 a.m. I should have been exhausted, but adrenaline kept me wired. Instead of sleep, I gathered what I could. Martha's photo, some cash from the safe, the revolver I hadn't touched in years but kept oiled and loaded just in case. Tonight, just in case, had arrived. Before I left the house, I penned a short note for Lucinda. My handwriting wavered, but the words were clear. Lucy, your husband is in danger. If you love him, take the kids and leave for your mother's house in the morning. Don't ask questions, just go. Trust me. I weighed it down with the salt shaker on her counter in Seattle. Tomorrow, she'd find it. Tomorrow, maybe she'd believe it. The sun was starting to edge over the horizon when I sat back in the Ford, engine rumbling beneath me. My path was set. I wasn't just running anymore. I was preparing for war. And as the first light of day bled across the sky, one truth burned in my chest. My son had underestimated me. He thought he was writing the ending to my story. But the story wasn't over. Not yet. By mid-morning, the sky had turned steel gray, the kind that threatened rain but never delivered more than a drizzle. My shop sat on the outskirts of town, a squat metal building tucked behind a row of fir trees. To most folks, it was just another small garage with faded signage and a cracked asphalt lot. To me, it was a second home. To Ethan's hired men, it would become a battlefield. The moment I rolled up the bay door, the familiar scent of grease, metal, and burnt rubber wrapped around me. Every tool was where I'd left it. The pegboard wall lined with wrenches, pliers, and hammers gleamed faintly under the fluorescent lights. My workbench was littered with half-finished carburetors and a stack of unpaid bills. I swept the mess aside. Today, this wasn't a garage. Today, it was my line in the sand. I started small, reinforcing the back door with steel plates I had lying around. Years of fixing wrecks meant I had more scrap than I knew what to do with. I bolted them across the wood, one after another, until the door was less an exit and more a wall. Next, the windows. They were narrow, meant for ventilation more than light, but wide enough for a rifle barrel. I nailed thick plywood across them, drilling holes just big enough for me to peer or aim through. Sweat trickled down my neck, but I didn't stop. Every thud of the hammer carried Martha's voice in my head. Don't let him take advantage of you, Daniel. Don't let him destroy you. By noon, the garage had transformed. Where once it was cluttered with projects, now it was stripped down to essentials. Tools I could wield as weapons. Heavy chains coiled like snakes, ready to strike fuel cans, lined neatly, in case I needed fire to do the talking. I stood back, surveying my work. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. I wasn't preparing to win a war. I was preparing to survive one. Still, doubt gnawed at me. What if I miscalculated? What if Ethan S. men weren't amateurs, but professionals, the kind who wouldn't stumble into obvious traps? What if Ethan himself came along? Could I really look my own son in the eye and see nothing but an enemy? The questions twisted in my gut, but I shoved them aside. Regret was for later. Resolve was for now. At 1 p.m., I called an old friend, Walter Jenkins, a retired cop who owed me a favor. I didn't give details, only asked him to swing by tomorrow around 9 a.m. for coffee. If things went bad, I wanted someone finding the aftermath sooner rather than later. Walter was sharp. He'd know what to do. After hanging up, I returned to my preparations. I set up choke points chains dangling from the rafters, oil slicks on the concrete floor, a loose scatter of ball bearings in front of the side door, anything to buy me seconds. Seconds meant survival. As evening crept closer, paranoia crept in with it. Every car that slowed on the road made me stiffen. Every crunch of gravel outside had me gripping the revolver. I caught myself checking the locks every 15 minutes, circling the shop like a caged animal. By 6 p.m., the waiting became worse than the fear. I poured another cup of coffee, bitter and lukewarm, and tried to steady my nerves. That's when I heard it. A whisper of footsteps outside, slow, deliberate. I killed the light, plunging the shop into shadow. My breath caught in my throat as I moved to the peephole I'd drilled earlier. A man stood by the tree line, tall, hood pulled low. He wasn't smoking, wasn't on his phone, just standing, watching. My heart pounded against my ribs. He wasn't alone. A second figure emerged, shorter, stockier, carrying what looked like a duffel bag. They lingered there for 5 minutes that felt like 5 hours. Then they retreated into the dark. I stayed frozen long after they vanished, every instinct screaming that this was no false alarm. They were casing the place, measuring angles, plotting entry. The storm had officially arrived. At 7:45, I crouched by the workbench, revolver resting beside me, tools within arm's reach. My body trembled, not from fear, but from the surge of adrenaline. I thought of Martha. I thought of Ethan, as a boy, riding his bike up and down our street. I thought of Lucinda, probably making dinner. Blissfully unaware, her husband was orchestrating murder. And then I heard the crunch of tires on gravel. Low voices carried through the walls. Boots hit the ground. 3 sets, maybe 4. The garage seemed to shrink around me, every sound amplified. The creak of a hinge, the shuffle of fabric, the faint click of metal. They were here. I tightened my grip on the revolver. The world narrowed to a single thought, burning hot and clear in my mind. If they wanted me dead, they'd have to earn it. And as the first hand tested the side door, rattling it against the chain I'd rigged, the fight began. The side door shuddered once, twice, before the chain snapped tight and held. Men outside cursed low, muffled by the steel plates I'd screwed in place. A dull thud followed the sound of a shoulder slamming against metal. They weren't subtle anymore. Go around, one voice hissed. Front bay's easier. I crouched low, heart thundering, revolver clenched so tight my knuckles blanched. Every nerve screamed at me to shoot blind through the wall, but I forced myself still. Patience, let them make the mistake. Boots scraped against the asphalt. Then came the squeal of the garage bay handle being tested, locked, reinforced with steel rods. Another curse, the duffel bag hit the ground. A moment later, the hiss of a cutting torch filled the night. My gut clenched. They were burning through the bay. I had maybe 3 minutes before the metal gave way. I scrambled to the far corner, yanking open a drawer to grab the old welding mask. My traps weren't designed to kill outright, but to slow, confuse, give me the seconds I needed to tip the scales. The hiss grew louder. Sparks danced across the concrete floor as the steel began to glow orange. I took a breath, steadying my hands, and kicked over the fuel can I'd left just inside the entry line. Gasoline spread in a dark ribbon across the floor, pooling where I'd scattered ball bearings earlier. Then, with one strike of a wrench against a flint, I lit it. Flames whooshed to life, racing across the floor in a jagged trail. Shouts erupted outside. The torch clattered, extinguished. Smoke him out. Another voice barked. A fist slammed the bay door. They weren't retreating, they were doubling down. The next sound chilled me. Glass breaking. They'd found the one window I hadn't fully reinforced. A figure hauled himself through the narrow frame, boots crunching as he landed inside. My revolver rose, steady, despite the tremor in my chest. Don't, I warned. My voice came out low, gravelly, almost unrecognizable even to me. The man froze, half crouched. A ski mask hid his face, but his hands tightened around a crowbar. For a heartbeat, silence hung between us. Then he lunged. The crowbar swung wide. I ducked, the metal whistling past my ear. My shoulder slammed into his ribs. We both hit the ground hard. The revolver skittered away, spinning under the workbench. Panic surged, but training took over. I grabbed the closest thing my hand touched, a heavy wrench. I swung once, twice, the clang of steel against bone ringing out. The man groaned, body going limp. I shoved him aside, chest heaving, and scrambled for the revolver. My fingers closed around the grip just as another shadow dropped through the same window. This one was faster. He landed light, a knife flashing in his hand. I fired. The shot cracked like thunder inside the garage. The man jerked, staggered, but kept coming, knife raised high. I fired again. This time he crumpled, the blade clattering from his hand. Smoke thickened, curling from the burning fuel. My eyes watered, lungs stinging. I stumbled to the back wall, pulling a rag over my mouth. Voices outside grew louder. "Two down, get in there." The bay door finally gave way with a screech of tearing metal. The gap yawned wide, and two more figures stormed through the haze. I fired blindly, the muzzle flash lighting their shapes. One ducked, the other yelped and fell to his knees. The second man surged forward, tackling me hard. We crashed into the workbench, tools raining down. His hand clamped around my wrist, forcing the revolver sideways. The barrel pressed into my temple. "Old man," he snarled, breath hot, "you should have just rolled over." My free hand scrabbled across the bench. Desperate. Fingers brushed metal. Pliers, a screwdriver, chains. I grabbed one and whipped it across his head. The sound was sickening. He staggered, grip loosening just enough for me to wrench free. I shoved him backward into the oil slick. His boots slid, legs kicking out as he crashed onto the concrete. Before he could rise, I swung the chain down again, hard. Silence followed, heavy, ragged silence, broken only by my gasps and the crackle of fading flames. I stood, swaying, revolver back in my grip, eyes darting between the sprawled bodies, three down, one groaning faintly. But outside, I knew there could be more. And somewhere beyond them, pulling the strings, was Ethan. I pressed my back to the wall, chest heaving, and felt the enormity of it all crash over me. I'd survived the first wave. I'd proven I wasn't the easy kill Ethan thought I was. But the war wasn't finished. It was only just beginning. The garage reeked of gunpowder, gasoline, and blood. Smoke hung in the air, drifting toward the rafters in lazy coils. My ears rang from the gunshots, each beat of silence filled with the phantom echoes of fists, chains, and screams. For a long moment, I just stood there, leaning against the workbench, revolver dangling at my side. My hands trembled, my knees ached, every bone in my body screamed at me to collapse. But I couldn't not yet. I forced myself to scan the floor. One man lay face down in the spreading oil, unmoving. Another was slumped against the wall, blood blooming across his chest, where the second bullet had landed. A third sprawled near the window, crowbar still clutched loosely in his hand, head bent at an unnatural angle. And then there was the fourth. He groaned, a low, ragged sound. I turned sharply, revolver rising again. The man I'd cracked with the chain was still breathing, barely. His mask had slipped, revealing a bruised jaw and bloodied lip. His eyes fluttered open, dazed but aware. I crossed the floor slowly, boots squelching through the mess. He tried to push himself up, but his arm buckled, sending him back down with a hiss of pain. "Don't move," I said, voice gravel low. His gaze flicked to the revolver, then back to me. "Please," he rasped. "Don't." "Name," he coughed, spitting blood onto the floor. "Doesn't matter." I pressed the barrel to his temple. "It does now." Silence stretched, broken only by his labored breaths. Then, "Marcus." "Name's Marcus." "Who sent you?" "Marcus." He gave a weak laugh that turned into a wince. "You already know." My jaw tightened. "Say it." His lips curled. "Your boy." The words hit harder than any blow I'd taken tonight. Hearing it confirmed, spoken aloud in this smoky graveyard of minute, was like a knife twisting in my gut. Marcus's gaze softened for just a moment, as if pitying me. "Didn't want to do it. Money's good. Your son's got deep pockets." I swallowed hard, bile rising. Ethan, my own flesh and blood. Not only had he betrayed me, he'd paid strangers to erase me from the world like a mistake. I pulled the revolver back an inch. "How many more?" Marcus blinked. "What? How many more are coming?" He hesitated, and I knew hesitation meant truth. "Couple more. Tonight was supposed to be quick, in and out." He wanted it clean. Clean. The word churned my stomach. Ethan wanted me gone so neatly, so quietly, that he could attend my funeral with crocodile tears and not a soul would suspect. I crouched, lower, my voice a growl. "Listen carefully. You tell your friends what happened here. You tell them I'm not a soft target. You tell them I'll bury every last one of you before I let you take me." Marcus nodded frantically, wincing as pain shot through his ribs. I stood, stepping back. My finger itched to end it right there. A single pull, and there'd be one less wolf at the door. But something held me back. Maybe Martha's voice. Maybe the knowledge that a corpse couldn't spread warnings, but a broken man could. I lowered the revolver. "Get out." He stared, shocked. "Go." I barked. Before I changed my mind. Marcus struggled to his feet, swaying, then staggered toward the bay door, limping into the night. His shadow vanished into the trees. Silence returned. Heavy final, I exhaled, long and shaking. The revolver slipped from my hand, clattering onto the workbench. My body slumped into the chair Martha used to sit in when she visited the shop. For the first time since last night, I felt the full weight of exhaustion crush me, but I couldn't rest. Not now. Marcus's words rang in my ears. Couple more. They'd keep coming until the job was done. Ethan wouldn't stop until I was in the ground, which meant I had two choices. Keep waiting, keep hiding, keep patching holes until they finally overwhelmed me, or take the fight where it belonged. To Ethan, the thought lit something deep in my chest. A cold, hard fire. Defense had saved me tonight, but it would only delay the inevitable. If I wanted to end this, I had to cut the head off the snake. I stood, moving stiffly, and began gathering what I'd need. The revolver, spare rounds, a combat knife I hadn't touched in decades, a length of chain, cash, keys. Then I pulled out Martha's photo again. Her smile steadied me, reminded me why I was still standing. I'm going to finish this, love, I whispered. For us. By dawn, the shop looked like a war zone. Bloodstains streaked the floor. The smell of burnt fuel lingered. I doused the embers, swept enough debris aside to mask the worst of it, and locked the bay door. Then I slid behind the wheel of the Ford. The engine rumbled to life, headlights cutting through the early morning fog. I didn't know exactly how I'd do it yet, but I knew where Ethan would be, his new condo on the north side, the one he'd bragged about while I paid the mortgage on his old house. He thought that place was his throne. Tonight, it would be his reckoning. As the road stretched ahead, one thought repeated like a drumbeat in my head. He wanted me dead. Now, it was my turn. The highway into the north side of Portland looked different at dawn. Sleek glass towers pierced the morning fog, their windows flashing with the first sunlight. Coffee shops bustled with young professionals. Joggers, in bright gear, dotted the sidewalks, earbuds in, oblivious to the darker current running just beneath the surface of the city. I pulled the Ford into an underground garage 3 blocks from Ethan's condo. The security cameras lining the entrance stared down at me like watchful eyes, but I knew their kind. They weren't hunting for old men in work boots driving beat-up trucks. They were looking for car thieves and vagrants. I sat for a long while, engine off, letting the world settle around me. Ethan lived on the 12th floor of the Carrington, one of those buildings with marble lobbies, private gyms, and rooftop lounges. I'd helped him pay the down payment years ago, when he swore he just needed a leg up until the promotions came through. Funny thing about legs up, they turned into ladders you never climbed down from. I slipped out of the Ford, duffel bag slung across my shoulder. Inside were the tools of a mechanic, a soldier, and a father betrayed. Revolver, knife, chain. Martha's picture, tucked into the side pocket like a talisman. The streets were busy enough to mask me, but not crowded. I moved slowly, blending in, head down like a man on his way to work. Old habits came back. Keep to the edges. Use reflections in glass for surveillance. Never look at a target head-on for too long. By the time I reached the Carrington, the doorman was out front, smiling as he tipped his cap to residents heading off for their 9-to-5s. I didn't approach. Not yet. I crossed to the coffee shop opposite and took a seat by the window, nursing a black coffee I barely tasted. From there, I had a perfect view. At 8:15 sharp, Ethan appeared. My breath hitched despite everything. He looked like the boy I'd raised and nothing like him all at once. Same strong jaw, same stride that once carried him across soccer fields as a teenager. But now it was dressed in a $1,000 suit, hair slicked with product, shoes shining like polished glass. He laughed as he spoke with the doorman, flashing that smile Martha used to call dangerous because it could get him out of anything. She was right. It had gotten him out of debts, fights, and responsibilities. And now, he thought it would get him out of Patrazite. He slipped into a waiting black SUV. The kind chauffeurs drive. A man like Ethan didn't just have success, he needed the appearance of it, too. I watched until the car pulled away. My fingers tightened around the coffee cup. Heat seared my skin, but I didn't let go. That SUV might as well have been a hearse. He didn't know it yet, but he was driving straight toward his reckoning. Still, my heart warred against itself. Memories bled into the present. Ethan at 5 years old, tugging at my sleeve in the shop, eyes wide as he asked how engines worked. Ethan at 12, crying when a bully bloodied his nose. Ethan at 17, headstrong and arrogant, but still running to me when his car broke down. Where had I lost him? Was it me? Was it Martha's illness? The long hours I poured into work? The money I gave too freely? Or had Ethan always been walking this path, and I was just too blind to see it? I pushed the thoughts down. Regret had no place here. What mattered was survival and justice. By noon, I'd tracked his routine. Meetings downtown. Lunch with associates. Back to the condo by evening. The predictability of it was almost insulting. He lived like a king, never once looking over his shoulder. Why would he? As far as he knew, his biggest problem was whether the men he hired had done their job. But tonight, the hunter would come home to find prey waiting in his castle. I spent the afternoon preparing. Bought a set of maintenance overalls from a thrift store. Picked up a toolbox to sell the disguise. In a city where deliveries and repairs came daily, no one would question an old man carrying tools through the service entrance. By 6 p.m., I was back across from the Carrington, waiting. The sun dipped behind the towers, shadows stretching long. Streetlights blinked alive. The city's rhythm changed, suits swapped for casual wear, business calls for laughter and clinking glasses. At 6:30, Ethan returned. The SUV dropped him at the curb. He kissed Lucinda on the cheek as she joined him from a boutique nearby, her arms heavy with shopping bags. My chest clenched. She looked tired, thinner than I remembered, her smile brittle. I wondered if she knew anything of his plot. My gut told me no. She was just another pawn in his game. They disappeared into the Carrington's lobby, the doorman sweeping the door open like a servant welcoming royalty. I waited 15 minutes. Then I stood, adjusted the overalls, and grabbed the toolbox. My reflection in the coffee shop window showed a man who looked like any other maintenance worker heading to a late-night job. Nothing more. As I crossed the street, Martha's words echoed in my head. Love doesn't mean blindness. Love means protecting yourself, too. The doorman glanced at me, then at the toolbox. I jerked my chin toward the service entrance. Maintenance. Got a work order upstairs. He barely looked twice before nodding. And just like that, I was inside. The lobby gleamed with marble floors and chandeliers. Polished mirrors reflected a stranger back at me, a ghost in coveralls, carrying a toolbox that rattled with weapons. I moved past the front desk and through the service hall, each step echoing with the weight of what I was about to do. When the elevator doors closed around me, I let out the breath I'd been holding all day. 12th floor, Ethan's floor. The ride felt endless. My hand hovered over the revolver inside the box, but I didn't draw it. Not yet. Because tonight wasn't about blind rage or reckless revenge. Tonight was about justice. And when those doors opened, when I walked into Ethan's perfect, polished world, he would finally face the father he tried to erase. The 12th floor smelled of expensive cologne and lemon polish. Each door gleamed with brass numbers, rugs so thick they muffled my boots. The Carrington wasn't built for men like me. It was built for men like Ethan, the kind who thought marble countertops and wine cellars could wash away what they'd done. I found his door at the end of the hall. Unit 1207. For a moment, I just stood there, listening. Voices drifted through. Ethan's smooth and practiced, talking about a merger. Lucinda's, softer, tired, asking him if he'd be home tomorrow or if the office needed him again. My jaw clenched. Same tone Martha once used when she begged me not to work double shifts. Same exhaustion. Ethan hadn't learned a damn thing. I pulled the lockpick set from the toolbox. The tumblers fell in less than 30 seconds. Old soldier's hands, still steady. The click of the lock echoed in my chest like a drumbeat. I stepped inside. The condo was all glass and steel, the kind of place designed for people who cared more about appearances than warmth. A grand piano in the corner, though I knew Ethan couldn't play a note. Shelves lined with books whose spines had never been cracked. Lucinda sat on the sofa, laptop in her lap, fingers pausing mid-keystroke when she saw me. Her eyes widened, mouth parting in a gasp. Before she could speak, I raised a finger to my lips. I'm not here to hurt you, Lucinda. My voice was low, steady. Where's Ethan? She looked toward the kitchen. That's when he appeared. Ethan strolled in with a glass of wine, sleeves rolled to his elbows, tie loose. He froze when he saw me. The glass slipped from his hand, shattering on the marble floor. Dad, his voice cracked on the word. Then it hardened. What the hell are you doing here? I stepped forward, closing the distance between us. The toolbox thudded onto the counter. I opened it just enough for him to glimpse the revolver inside. His eyes flickered to it, then back to me. You sent men to kill me, I said quietly. Your own father. Lucinda gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. She looked between us, confusion clouding her face. Ethan, what is he talking about? Ethan's jaw worked. He laughed, sharp and hollow. This is insane. He's delusional. Dad, you've lost it. You show up here in coveralls, breaking into my home, spinning fairy tales. Don't lie to me. My voice thundered through the condo, years of swallowed pain breaking loose. I found the man you hired. I know everything. Lucinda turned to Ethan, horror dawning. You what? Ethan's mask cracked. For the first time, I saw the boy beneath the man, the cornered child, desperate and furious. You should have stayed gone, old man, he spat. You don't belong here, you never did. You were nothing but a wrench turner, a nobody. All I ever wanted was to be free of you. The words cut deep, but instead of breaking me, they steeled me. I stepped closer, my shadow falling over him. I worked my hands to the bone so you could stand here in this palace. I missed nights with your mother, birthdays, dinners, because I believed in you. And this is what you do. You put a price on my head. Ethan's face twisted. You think I owe you. I built this life. You were just a stepping stone. And now you're a liability. Lucinda shook her head in disbelief. Tears welled in her eyes. Ethan, tell me this isn't true, please. But he didn't answer her. His gaze stayed locked on me, burning with hatred. That's when he lunged. He went for the toolbox, fingers scrabbling for the revolver. But I was faster. Old reflexes roared back to life. I slammed the lid shut on his hand. the snap of bones sharp as gunfire. Ethan screamed, collapsing against the counter. Lucinda cried out, rushing forward. I held up a hand. Stay back. This is between me and him. Ethan clutched his hand to his chest, face pale, sweat beading on his forehead. You're insane, he hissed. You're finished. You think you can just barge into my life and threaten me? I'll call the cops. I'll ruin you. I leaned down, my voice a growl. You already tried to ruin me, son, but you forgot one thing. I grabbed his collar, yanking him close. His eyes widened as he saw the fire in mine. I don't die easy. The condo fell into silence, broken only by Lucinda's sobs and Ethan's ragged breathing. For a long moment, none of us moved. Then I let him go. He crumpled to the floor, clutching his broken hand, eyes wide with fear and fury. You wanted to erase me, I said, standing tall, looking down at him. But tonight, Ethan, the truth comes out. You're not the golden boy. You're a coward who betrayed his own blood. Lucinda whispered his name again, her voice breaking. Ethan, how could you? And that was the crack in his armor. He looked at her, saw the disgust in her eyes, and for the first time, he seemed smaller, weaker. But I wasn't done. Not yet, because this wasn't just about breaking his body. It was about breaking the illusion he'd built, the lie he'd been living. I picked up the toolbox, snapping it shut. This isn't over, I told him, my voice cold as steel. Tomorrow, the world will know what you've done. Ethan's eyes burned into mine. You'll regret this, he spat. You don't know who you're messing with. I turned toward the door, pausing only to glance at Lucinda. I'm sorry you had to see this. But you deserved the truth. Then I stepped out into the hallway, the lock clicking behind me. My heart pounded, my hands shook, but I didn't falter. Because tonight, the war had truly begun. And for the first time in years, I wasn't the one running. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the edge of the motel bed, toolbox at my feet, revolver on the nightstand, eyes locked on the ceiling, as if answers might carve themselves into the plaster. Every word Ethan had thrown at me echoed in my skull. You were nothing but a wrench turner, a nobody. Once, those words would have gutted me. Now they lit a fire I hadn't felt in decades. He wanted me erased. He wanted me dead, but he underestimated just how much fight was left in the old man he thought he buried years ago. By dawn, I was gone from the motel. The city was already buzzing awake, taxis honking, joggers moving like clockwork. I blended in, coveralls dusty, toolbox swinging at my side. No one looked twice. That anonymity was my shield. At a corner cafe, I bought the paper. Ethan's face was there on the business page, smiling that politician's smile. Carrington Capital announces record profits. Perfect image, clean, successful, untouchable. I folded it tight, shoved it in my pocket. That mask was about to crack. Ethan, meanwhile, wasn't sleeping either. Across town, in his glass palace, he barked into the phone, pacing like a caged animal. His broken hand was bound in a sling, but his fury burned hotter than the pain. Find him, he roared at one of his men. I don't care what it costs. I want him gone tonight. Lucinda hovered near the doorway, her face pale. She'd spent hours replaying what she'd seen. The way her husband had lunged for the gun. The way he hadn't denied Daniel's accusations. Ethan, her voice trembled. Please, just tell me the truth. Did you really? He whirled on her, eyes wild. Don't start with me, Lucinda. You don't know what that man's capable of. He's dangerous. But he's your father, she snapped, tears spilling. And you didn't even deny it. You looked him in the eye, and enough. He thundered, slamming his good hand against the wall. The sound made her flinch. For the first time, Lucinda saw through the polish, the charm. She saw the man beneath the same man Daniel had confronted, and a seed of doubt sprouted. While Ethan spun his web of lies, I began weaving my net of truth. I drove to the scrapyard at the edge of the city, the place where old machines went to die. It was quiet there, the kind of quiet I could think in. From the back of the truck, I pulled the battered camcorder I'd used years ago to record family birthdays. Funny, how the same lens that once captured Ethan blowing out candles would now capture his sins. I rewound the recording I'd made in the garage. The man I'd caught, beaten and chained. His voice rasped through the speaker, half-conscious, but the words clear enough. Ethan. Ethan said you wouldn't make it out alive. That was my weapon, not the revolver, not the traps. But the truth, raw and undeniable. Still, it wasn't enough. A video without context could be dismissed. I needed more. Paper trails, financials, witnesses, and I knew just where to look. Ethan's old fixer, a man named Nolan Price. I hadn't seen him in years. But back when I was still patching up Ethan's messes, Nolan was always the one smoothing things over behind the scenes. I'd find him, and when I did, Ethan's empire would crumble from the inside out. Back at the condo, Ethan sat in his study, curtains drawn, a tumbler of scotch untouched at his elbow. His phone buzzed again. Sir, one of his men said, we canvassed the motels. He's not there anymore. But, there's chatter. Some kid at a scrapyard said he saw a guy matching your father's description with a camera. Sir, He's collecting something. Ethan's grip tightened on the phone. Evidence. His reflection in the dark glass glared back at him. For the first time in years, the mask slipped in, he saw fear. Lucinda entered quietly, her hand resting on the doorframe. She studied him with eyes red from crying. If he has proof, Ethan. He snapped his head toward her. Then I'll bury him before he shows it. Do you understand? But Lucinda didn't answer. She simply turned and walked away, her silence louder than any words. That night, I set up the camcorder in the dim light of the scrapyard office. My voice, gravelly but steady, filled the tape. My name is Daniel Cole. If you're watching this, I may not be alive, but you need to know what my son, Ethan, has done. I laid it all out. The betrayal, the hired men, the confrontation in the condo. Every detail, spoken into the record. Not just for me, but for Martha, for the years she spent believing our boy would grow into a man worth her sacrifice. When I finished, I sat back, staring at the blinking red light. My throat burned, my chest ached, but I felt lighter, because even if Ethan managed to silence me, the truth would live on. But I wasn't planning on dying just yet. The next phase would hit Ethan where it hurt most, not in his body, but in his empire. I'd feed the video to the one place he couldn't control, the press, and once the first domino fell, his perfect life would collapse, piece by piece. The time for hiding was over. The war was moving into the open. The newsroom was smaller than I'd imagined. A cramped floor on the 5th story of a brick building, paper stacks everywhere, the smell of ink and burnt coffee thick in the air. But these people weren't here for glamour, they were here for blood, and I was ready to give them some. I slid the USB drive across the desk to the reporter, a wiry woman named Clara Finch. She'd cut her teeth on political scandals, not corporate ones. But when I said the words Ethan Cole and murder her for hire, her eyes sharpened like a hawk's. This isn't the sort of accusation we can print on word alone, she warned. If this is a smear campaign, it isn't, I said flatly. Play the file. She hesitated, then plugged it in. The screen flickered to life, showing the chained man in my garage, his voice weak, but his words cutting like knives. Ethan said you wouldn't make it out alive. Clara's eyes widened. She rewound, played it again, her pen tapping the desk. And you're saying this man was hired to kill you, by your own son? I nodded once. She leaned back, exhaling slowly. If this checks out, it's a bombshell. Then light the fuse, I said. By the next morning, the city was buzzing. Headlines screamed across every digital platform. Business mogul Ethan Cole linked to alleged murder plot. Exclusive security camera captures. Hitman naming Ethan Cole. Talk shows dissected it. Social media churned with speculation. Some called me a bitter old man grasping for relevance. Others demanded Ethan's arrest. And for the first time, the golden boy's smile faltered in public. In his office, high above the city, Ethan raged. He slammed his sling-bound hand against the desk, scattering papers. His PR team huddled like frightened sheep as he barked orders. Shut it down, get injunctions, smear him as a drunk, a senile lunatic. I don't care how. One advisor cleared his throat nervously. Sir, the footage is compelling. If there's corroboration, then bury the corroboration. Ethan roared. I don't pay you to whimper, I pay you to fix this. But even as the words left his mouth, he knew. The story was already loose. Once the press smelled blood, they never stopped circling. He poured himself a drink with shaking fingers, muttering, he thinks he's clever. He thinks this'll ruin me. I'll show him ruin. Behind him, Lucinda watched from the doorway. She'd heard every word. Her eyes lingered on him like she was looking at a stranger. Ethan, she whispered, voice cracking. Is it true? He spun, eyes wild. Don't you start, too. I told you, it's lies. But the video, he stepped forward, looming, that old man is trying to destroy me. And if you believe him over me, then maybe you're not the woman I thought you were. The silence that followed was deafening. Lucinda blinked back tears, then turned and walked away. This time, Ethan didn't follow. He poured another drink instead. I sat in the diner down the street, nursing a cup of black coffee, watching the news ticker crawl across the TV mounted in the corner. Ethan's face appeared again and again, no longer framed in golden light but under suspicion, his empire's sheen cracking with each new headline. It wasn't enough to bring him down. Not yet. But it was the first domino. I thought of Martha then, of the nights she'd sat alone at the kitchen table, waiting for me to come home, believing in our son's promise. I wondered what she'd think now, seeing the boy she raised paraded across the news as a villain. My chest tightened. This wasn't the victory I wanted her to witness, but it was a start. Meanwhile, Ethan made his next move, at a press conference hastily called in the marble lobby of Carrington Capitol. He stood before cameras, his sling visible, face polished with makeup. He spoke with that same practiced cadence I'd once been proud of. These allegations are baseless, he declared. They come from a man who has long struggled with bitterness and instability. I love my father, but the truth is, he has not been well for some time. I urge the media and the public to respect our family's privacy. As we addressed this painful situation, the crowd buzzed, questions flying. What about the footage? Will you press charges against your father? Ethan raised a hand, feigning pain. No further comments at this time. It was a performance. But even good performances could unravel under the right pressure, and pressure was exactly what I planned to apply. As I left the diner, I dialed a number I hadn't called in years. Nolan Price, I asked when the voice answered. A pause, then a low chuckle. Haven't heard that name in a while. Who's asking? It's Daniel Cole. We need to talk. The line went silent for a beat. Then Nolan said, if this is about Ethan, I figured this day might come. My grip tightened on the phone. Meet me tomorrow, you know where. I hung up before he could answer, because I knew he'd come. Men like Nolan always did when they smelled the chance to save their own skin. That night, I sat in the motel again, revolver on the nightstand, toolbox at my feet. Outside, sirens wailed in the distance, the city humming like a restless beast. I thought about Ethan, about the words he'd spit at me in that condo. You were nothing but a wrench turner. He was wrong. I wasn't nothing. I was the man who built him, and I was going to be the man who broke him. The scrapyard was quiet at dawn, the air sharp with the smell of rust and oil. I sat on the hood of the old Ford, toolbox by my side, revolver heavy in my pocket. The kind of morning that carried more weight than words, because I knew whoever walked through those gates would tip the balance of this war. Nolan Price arrived 10 minutes late, as I expected. That was his style. Never punctual, always testing the other man's patience, making himself seem more important than he was. He pulled up in a sleek black sedan, the kind bought with other people's money, and stepped out in a suit that didn't quite fit. His hair was thinning, his smile too wide, but his eyes were sharp as a crow's, always looking for something to pick clean. Danny boy, he drawled, adjusting his cufflinks as he approached. Been a long time. I didn't move from the hood. Cut the act, Nolan, you know why you're here. He smirked, but there was a twitch in his jaw. You made quite the splash on the news. Thought you'd gone soft in your old age, but looks like you still know how to throw a wrench in the machine. I leaned forward, voice low. Ethan tried to have me killed. You helped cover his tracks, and now you're going to help me undo them. The smirk faltered. Careful, Daniel. Accusations like that. I reached into the toolbox and pulled out the camcorder. Pressed play. The chained man's voice filled the space again. Ethan said, you wouldn't make it out alive. Nolan's smile vanished. His eyes darted to the gates, to the sky, anywhere but me. Hell, he muttered, rubbing the back of his neck. You really do have him cornered. Not cornered enough, I said. I need paper. Transfers. Contracts. Names. Something no lawyer can sweep under a rug. He paced, chewing his lip. You're asking me to sign my own death warrant. You know what Ethan does to people who cross him. I stood, closing the distance. Ethan already wrote mine. The only difference is, I fight back. Nolan studied me, weighing his options. Finally, he sighed, shoulders slumping. There's a ledger. Off-the-books payments. He kept it in case his clients ever turned on him. If you get that, Ethan's finished. Where is it? Nolan hesitated. His office, top drawer, right-hand side, locked, but. He paused, eyes narrowing. If I give you that, I'm a dead man. He'll know it came from me. I leaned closer, my voice like gravel. Then maybe you should have thought about that before you hitched yourself to a snake. For a moment, I thought he'd bolt. But then, Nolan reached into his jacket and pulled out a flash drive. He held it between two fingers, just out of reach. This isn't the ledger, he said, but it's a start. Audio phone calls. Ethan arranging meetings with men he never wanted his board to know about. I took it, tucking it into my pocket. Why give this to me? He smirked again, though his eyes betrayed fear. Because if Ethan goes down, I need someone to remember Nolan Price wasn't his biggest devil. Just one of the smaller ones. Before I could answer, a sound cut through the scrapyard. The low growl of vengeance. Nolan stiffened. You brought company. My gut turned cold. I hadn't. Which meant Ethan had. Two black SUVs rolled through the gates, dust billowing behind them. Doors opened, men spilling out, all dressed in dark suits, moving with purpose. Nolan cursed under his breath. Christ, he must have been watching me. I grabbed him by the collar, dragging him toward the Ford. Move. Bullets cracked, pinging off the metal around us. Nolan dove into the passenger seat as I swung into the driver's. The Ford roared to life. Coughing smoke, but the old engine still had teeth. We tore through the scrapyard, weaving between heaps of twisted metal as gunfire echoed. The SUVs followed, headlights cutting through the dust. Nolan clutched the dashboard, pale as death. He won't stop. Daniel, you've got no idea what you've started. I gritted my teeth, eyes locked on the road ahead. Oh, I know exactly what I've started. The Ford burst through the gates, sparks flying as the bumper scraped the asphalt. I didn't slow, not until the city swallowed us. Traffic masking our trail, the SUV is fading in the distance. Finally, I pulled into an alley, heart hammering, hands shaking. Nolan sat silent, staring at the dash. I turned to him. That ledger, I'm getting it. You're going to help me. He swallowed hard, then nodded. If we do this, Ethan's empire burns. You understand? I stared at him, voice steady. That's the point. Back in his office, Ethan hurled a vase across the room, glass shattering. His men shifted uneasily, none daring to speak. He's alive, Ethan hissed, pacing. Alive and making deals with rats. My father thinks he can drag me through the mud. I'll bury him 6 feet under before the week is out. But even as he raged, he couldn't shake the dread gnawing at him. Because for the first time in his life, Ethan Cole wasn't in control. That night, in the motel, I studied the flash drive Nolan had given me. Ethan's voice crackled through the headphones. Smooth.com, arranging meetings that were anything but legal. Each word was a nail in his coffin. And soon, I'd have the hammer. The city at night was a different kind of beast. Glass towers cut into the sky like knives, their windows glowing with the secrets of men who thought themselves untouchable. Ethan Cole's headquarters stood at the center of it all. 27 floors of steel and arrogance. I'd helped pour the foundation of that building back when Ethan was just a boy, riding my shoulders. I never thought I'd live to break into it. Beside me, Nolan fidgeted in the passenger seat, tugging at his tie like it was choking him. You know this is suicide, right? Cameras, guards, motion sensors. Ethan doesn't play cheap. I tightened my gloves. Then you'd better earn your keep. Nolan shot me a look. You've got guts, old man. But guts don't mean much against bullets. I ignored him, pulling the car into an underground lot 2 blocks from Ethan's tower. We walked the rest of the way, blending with the late-night crowd, 2 shadows swallowed by neon lights. Inside, Nolan flashed a forged badge at the security desk, his charm oily but effective. The guard barely glanced up before waving us through. My heartbeat slowed, but only slightly. This was just the front door. We rode the elevator in silence, the soft jazz in the background at odds with the storm in my chest. Floor after floor ticked by until the doors slid open on the 25th. Ethan's private offices. The air here was different, colder, quieter, the hum of money and power buzzing beneath every step. Ledgers in his study, Nolan whispered, guiding me down a hallway lined with glass walls. Top drawer, right-hand side, like I said, but there's biometric lock on the cabinet. I raised an eyebrow. And you can open it. Nolan gave a thin smile. If I couldn't, I'd be dead years ago. We slipped into Ethan's office. It was a shrine to vanity. Leather chairs, walls of expensive liquor, a desk bigger than most dining tables, and behind it, a safe cabinet gleamed with steel. Nolan knelt, pulling tools from his jacket. His hands shook, but not enough to stop him working. I kept watch at the door, every nerve tuned to the silence. Almost there, he muttered. A faint beat, then a click. The cabinet opened with a hiss. Inside sat a thick black ledger, edges gilded, the weight of sins pressed between its covers. Nolan lifted it with a reverence usually reserved for holy books. You're looking at years of blood and money. Every deal, every hit, every payoff, I took it, feeling its weight, proof, justice, revenge, all in one. But then the office lights blazed on. Well, Ethan stood in the doorway, flanked by 2 guards, his smile cutting sharper than any blade. He looked immaculate, tailored suit, polished shoes, but his eyes burned with something feral. I wondered how long it would take before you crawled into my den, he said, voice smooth. And here you are, stealing like a common thief. I held the ledger tight. Funny. That's what I learned from you. Ethan's smirk widened. Do you really think that book saves you? Half the city's in those pages, judges, politicians, police chiefs. You release it, and you don't just burn me. You burn yourself, too. Behind me, Nolan swallowed hard. Ethan, shut up, Nolan, Ethan snapped, his eyes never leaving mine. You've always been a rat, and rats don't get second chances. The guards stepped forward, guns raised. I knew talking wouldn't save me. Action would. With a roar, I flipped the massive desk, sending papers flying, and dove for cover. Gunfire erupted, glass shattering, wood splintering. Nolan screamed, crawling behind a chair. I pulled the revolver from my coat and fired twice. One guard dropped, clutching his leg. The other ducked behind a shelf, bullets whizzing past me. Ethan retreated to the hall, shouting orders, his composure cracking for the first time. Grab him. I want him alive. Nolan crawled toward me, face pale. We're dead, Daniel, dead. I grabbed his collar. Window, now. We barreled across the office, bullets shredding the walls behind us. I smashed the window with the butt of my gun, shards raining into the night. 25 floors up, the city lights stretched below, like a sea of stars. Nolan gaped. You've lost your mind. Climb, I barked, shoving him toward the ledge. Outside, a maintenance scaffold hung 2 floors down. A risk, but better than a bullet. Nolan hesitated, then hurled himself onto the ledge, gripping the frame with white knuckles. I followed, the cold wind slapping my face, the ledger strapped tight under my arm. Behind us, Ethan's guards stormed the office. I glanced back just long enough to see Ethan's face twisted with fury, as he realized we'd slipped through his fingers. We climbed down, breath ragged, glass crunching under our boots. By the time we reached the scaffold, sirens wailed in the distance. Ethan had triggered the alarm. We fled into the night, vanishing into alleys while the building swarmed with security. Only when we were safe in the shadows did Nolan collapse against a wall, panting. "You're insane," he wheezed. "But I'll be damned, you pulled it off." I looked at the ledger, its cover cold and heavy in my hands. For the first time in weeks, I felt the tide turning. Ethan wasn't untouchable anymore, not with this in my grasp. I'd stared at the ledger for hours, running my fingers over its thick spine, as if it were alive. Every page was a confession. Wire transfers, hit contracts, offshore accounts, the kind of evidence that could topple not just Ethan, but everyone who had protected him, judges, bankers, senators. But I knew one thing, if I held on to it too long, it would be my coffin. So I made the call. Her name was Clara Bennett, a journalist I trusted. She'd once covered one of Ethan's development scandals years back, and instead of bowing to pressure, she printed the truth. She paid the price, blacklisted, forced into independent work, but she never bent. When I met her in a diner off 7th Street, she was already waiting with a notepad. Her eyes widened when I slid the ledger across the table, wrapped in plain brown paper. "Daniel, do you have any idea what this is?" she whispered, flipping a page. "Yay," I said, sipping my black coffee. "It's the reason men have been trying to put me in the ground for weeks. And it's also the reason Ethan Cole is about to lose everything." Her hands trembled slightly as she read. "This isn't just Ethan, this is half the city." "Then print it," I said, "all of it, every word." For a long moment, Clara looked at me, her jaw tightening. "They'll come after me." Hard I leaned in. "They already have. But you stood your ground before, do it again. This time I'll make sure they can't touch you." She studied me, then nodded. "You'll have your story, and Ethan will have his funeral." By morning, the world had changed. News outlets erupted with headlines. Leaked pages from the ledger splashed across TV screens and phone alerts. Anchors' voices shook as they read names no one dared to say out loud. Judges who signed off on false warrants. Contractors paid to sabotage projects, even to senators taking Ethan's money. The city buzzed with shock and fury. Ethan's allies scattered, distancing themselves with rehearsed statements. Protesters gathered outside his tower. The empire he'd built on silence was crumbling under the weight of his own words. But if I thought Ethan would go quietly, I was a fool. That afternoon, Lucinda called me in tears. "Dad, there were men outside the school." My blood turned to ice. "What did they do?" "They didn't come in, but I saw them. Watch, just standing there, leaning against a black SUV. When I looked at them, they smiled. I've never been so scared." My hand clenched the phone so tight my knuckles cracked. "Pack a bag. Take the kids. Go to Clara Bennett's place. Now. I'll meet you there." Her voice broke. "Is this ever going to end?" I swallowed hard. "Yes, but not until I finish it." When I met her, she was pale. The kids huddled close. I hugged them, then scanned the street. No SUVs, no watchers. For now, but Ethan's message was clear. "Touch my empire, and I'll touch your blood." Nolan sat in the corner, nursing a drink. His face was drawn, eyes darting. "You had to leak it, didn't you?" he muttered. "Couldn't just sit quiet. Now he'll torch everything." I turned on him. "You knew what you were signing up for." He laughed bitterly. "I signed up to save my own skin, not get caught in your family drama." I stepped closer, my shadow swallowing him. "You think this is just family drama?" He ordered me dead. "He's circling my daughter. If you want to walk away, fine. But the second you do, he'll put a bullet in your back." Nolan paled, but said nothing. That night, Ethan made his move. The news ran a live statement from him, standing in front of his tower with cameras flashing. His smile was gone, his voice sharp as a knife. "My so-called father has gone mad," he declared. "He broke into my offices, stole confidential documents, and fabricated lies to ruin me. He is unstable, dangerous, and violent. He has threatened my family and others. I beg the authorities to act before he hurts anyone else." Watching from Clara's living room, I felt bile rise in my throat. The man who had signed my death warrant now painted me as the villain. And the world was eating it up. "Daniel," Clara said softly, "if enough people believe him, the police will hunt you harder than his men." I nodded, jaw tight. "Then I need to end this before his lies take root." 2 hours later, the house shook with a thunderous crash. Windows shattered, alarms blared, men in black masks poured in, guns raised. Ethan's men. Lucinda screamed, clutching the children. Clara ducked behind the sofa, grabbing her camera. Of all things, Nolan froze like a rabbit in headlights. But I didn't freeze. I grabbed the shotgun I'd kept by the door and fired, the blast echoing through the night. One man fell, another staggered. The kids cried. Lucinda dragged them toward the back. The fight was chaos. Muzzle flashes, shouts, the sting of glass in my face. But I fought like a man with nothing left to lose. When the smoke cleared, 3 men lay bleeding, the others gone. I stood panting, blood trickling down my arm. Lucinda clutched the children, sobbing. Clara, unbelievably, was filming. And Nolan, Nolan had vanished. I found him 15 minutes later, sneaking out the back alley, phone in hand. I pressed my revolver to his temple. "Who were you calling?" he stammered, eyes wide. I swear, Daniel, I wasn't." I yanked the phone from his hand. The screen still glowed. A message, half-typed. "He's here. Ledger's with him. Address below." My chest tightened with rage. "You sold me out." Nolan dropped to his knees, trembling. He would have killed me if I didn't. I had no choice. I stared down at him, my finger heavy on the trigger. Part of me wanted to end it right there, but I holstered the gun. "You'll get what's coming. Not from me, from him." I turned and walked back inside, leaving Nolan on his knees in the dirt, because now I knew the truth. Ethan wasn't just defending himself anymore. He was coming for all of us, and I was going to meet him head-on. The night after the attack, the safe house was quiet, but my mind wasn't. I sat by the window with the ledger open across my knees, my revolver resting on the sill. Outside, the streetlights flickered, every shadow looking like another one of Ethan's men. Lucinda slept fitfully in the next room with the kids. Clara was typing furiously, uploading another with scanned pages from the ledger. She was fearless, brave, but bravery didn't stop bullets. And Nolan hadn't come back. I should have put him down when I had the chance. By morning, Clara shook me awake. "Daniel," she whispered, eyes wide, "you need to see this." She turned on the TV. Ethan stood on the courthouse steps, cameras flashing around him. But he wasn't smiling anymore. His face was hard, his voice venom. "Last night, my father murdered 3 men in cold blood. He is armed, dangerous, and in possession of stolen documents he intends to use to blackmail this city. If anyone has information on his whereabouts, I urge them to come forward." Beside him stood Nolan Price. His suit was freshly pressed, his hair slicked back, but his eyes darted like a rat trapped in a corner. Ethan laid a hand on Nolan's shoulder. "This man has bravely stepped forward. He was manipulated, coerced, nearly killed. He'll testify to my father's crimes, and together we'll see justice done." My fist clenched so tight the ledger creaked. Lucinda appeared behind me, pale as a ghost. "Dad, he's turning the whole world against you." I shook my head. "No, he's showing his hand. If Nolan's still breathing, it means Ethan needs him, which means Nolan's not just bait, he's a doorway." That afternoon, a text buzzed on Clara's burner phone. She handed it to me with trembling fingers. The message was short, unsigned, but I knew the voice behind it. "Meet me at the old rail yard, midnight, come alone. Ledger, for your family's safety." Lucinda's voice cracked. "Dad, you can't." I met her eyes. "I don't have a choice." She grabbed my arm. "Yes, you do. Don't walk into his trap, please." I cupped her face in my hands, the way I used to when she was little. "Honey, he's already inside our lives. If I don't end this, none of us are safe." She shook her head, tears spilling. "Then promise me you'll come back." I swallowed hard. "I'll try." The rail yard was a graveyard of steel and silence. Tracks rusted, boxcars abandoned under the pale moon. Midnight air bit at my skin as I walked between the shadows, the ledger tucked under my arm. I knew he'd be watching, and sure enough, lights snapped on, floodlamps blinding me from the edges of the yard. Figures stepped from the dark. 6, maybe 8, all armed, all aiming at me. And in the middle, standing tall in his tailored coat, was Ethan. He clapped slowly, mock applause echoing in the cold. "You never disappoint, old man. Always stubborn, always predictable." I kept my grip tight on the ledger. "You want this? Come take it." He smirked. "Oh, I will. But first," he gestured, and 2 guards dragged someone forward. Nolan. His face was bruised, his suit torn, lips split. He stumbled, barely able to stand. Ethan shoved him down in front of me. "Your little friend thought he could play both sides." I reminded him where his loyalties belong. Nolan coughed, blood on his chin. He looked up at me, eyes wild with shame. "Daniel, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to shut him up," Ethan snapped. One of his men backhanded Nolan across the face. I tightened my jaw. "You've already destroyed him. Ethan, what more do you want?" Ethan's smile was thin, venomous. "I want you. That ledger doesn't matter if I don't kill the man waving it around. You think leaking a few pages will stop me? Please. I built this city on ashes. I can build it again. But first, I'm going to erase you." Slowly, he raised his hand, and his men closed in. I dropped to the ground as the first shots cracked, rolling behind an old boxcar. Bullets sparked against steel, the air filled with the stench of gunpowder. I fired back, dropping one of his men, then sprinted along the tracks. Ledger clutched to my chest. Nolan crawled toward me, dragging himself through the dirt. Don't leave me here," he begged, voice breaking. I grabbed his arm, hauling him behind cover just as another hail of bullets tore into the gravel. "You wanted to be on the winning side," I growled. "Now earn it." Together we scrambled between rusted cars, each step a fight against the storm. I fired blindly, forcing Ethan's men back. But there were too many, too well armed. Then, a sharp whistle cut through the chaos. A freight train, long abandoned, suddenly roared to life on the far track. Floodlights lit the yard as the engine thundered past, horn blaring. Through the smoke and noise, I saw Ethan standing still, unshaken, his coat whipping in the wind. His eyes met mine across the distance, cold, burning with hatred. He shouted over the din, his voice carrying, "Run while you can, Daniel, it won't matter. You can't outrun blood." Then the train thundered between us, cutting him from sight. By the time it passed, he was gone. His men scattered, retreating like shadows into the night. Nolan collapsed beside me, gasping, You saved me." I glared down at him. "Don't thank me yet. You've still got a debt to pay." He coughed, clutching his ribs. "What debt?" I held up the ledger. "Getting this into the right hands. Ethan thinks he's untouchable, but this book says otherwise. You're going to help me deliver it." He closed his eyes, face twisted with regret. "He'll kill me." I leaned in, my voice a whisper. "Not if I get to him first." Later, back at the safe house, Lucinda rushed to me the moment I stepped through the door. Her hands touched my face, my chest, as if making sure I was real. "You're alive," she whispered. "Barely," I admitted. Behind her, Clara glanced up from her laptop. "Daniel, I don't know how much longer I can hold this off. They're spinning everything. Half the city thinks you're a terrorist, the other half, they're starting to believe." I dropped the ledger on the table. "Then we end it." "Tonight?" Lucinda's eyes widened. "Dad," I looked at her, steady, resolute, "this doesn't end until Ethan's finished. For good, and for the first time since this war began, I knew it was true. Tomorrow, one of us would die, and it wasn't going to be me." The night of the final confrontation felt like stepping into a storm I had been chasing for years. The city was buzzing with Ethan's scandals splashed across every channel. But scandal wasn't enough. Men like Ethan didn't just fade away. They had to be dragged down, kicking and screaming, until there was nothing left for them to hold on to. I chose the place carefully, the half-built skyscraper downtown. Ironically, one of my old projects abandoned halfway through construction after Ethan funneled the budget into his offshore accounts. Steel beams rose into the night sky, skeletal and unfinished, creaking in the wind like a monument to our broken bond. When Ethan arrived, flanked by 2 guards, I saw no trace of the boy I raised. His tailored suit clung to him like armor, but his eyes were wild, red-rimmed, desperate. "Father," he spat the word like poison. "You should have stayed dead to me." I didn't flinch. "You tried to make sure of it, but I'm still standing. And the world knows who you are now." He laughed. Brittle, hollow. "You think leaking a few files will stop me? Money buys silence. Money buys loyalty. Money buys power. And I've got more of it than you can dream." I stepped forward, slowly. "Not anymore. Half your allies have already cut you off. The other half are selling you out. Your empire's crumbling. Ethan, and tonight, I'm here to finish what you started." For a moment, I thought I saw fear flicker across his face. But then he snapped his fingers, and his guards moved in. The fight was brutal. I wasn't young anymore, but desperation makes a man dangerous. I swung a length of rebar, catching one guard across the jaw. He fell, groaning. The other lunged, knife in hand, but I slammed him into a support beam with a force that rattled my bones. My body screamed in protest, but I couldn't stop. Not now. Ethan didn't run. He stood there, shaking with fury, waiting for me. "Always so self-righteous," he snarled as I staggered toward him. "All those nights you left me waiting at the dinner table while you worked. You never gave me love. Only lectures. You built buildings, not a son." His words cut deeper than any blade, because a part of me knew there was truth there. But rage drowned out regret. "And you repaid that by hiring men to bury me 6 feet under. By putting a price on my head. You lost the right to call yourself my son the moment you signed that deal." He lunged then, pulling a gun from his coat. I dove behind a beam as the shot rang out, sparks flying from steel. My heart thundered in my chest. "Come out, old man," Ethan roared. "You can't hide forever." I remembered the flash drive Nolan had hidden, the one broadcasting everything live to the journalist's desk feed. Ethan's every word, every bullet, every confession was being streamed to thousands by now. His arrogance had become his undoing. I stepped out, no longer hiding. If this was how it ended, so be it. "You want me, Ethan, then do it. But the world will know. They already do. You'll never wash the blood off your hands." He hesitated, finger trembling on the trigger. The gun shook, and in that pause, I saw the boy he once was. Frightened, angry, desperate for approval. My son. But then his jaw tightened, and that boy was gone. "I don't need the world. I just need you gone." He pulled the trigger, but the chamber clicked empty. His face froze in shock. I charged, slamming into him with all the force left in my body. The gun skittered across the concrete floor. We grappled, fists flying, bones cracking. I could taste blood, hot and metallic, as we stumbled toward the edge of the unfinished floor. Nothing but open air below. Ethan clawed at me, spitting curses. "You ruined me, everything I am. It's because of you." I locked eyes with him, forcing out the words through gritted teeth. No, Ethan, everything you are was your choice. With one final heave, I shoved him back. His heel caught on the edge of the concrete, and for a split second, his eyes went wide with terror. Then he was gone, plunging into the dark abyss below. The silence that followed was deafening. Only the wind whispered through the steel skeleton as I stood there, chest heaving, staring at the empty space where my son had been. I don't know how long I stood before the wail of sirens filled the night. Police, reporters, flashing lights. They found me still gripping the rebar. My body broken, but my spirit unbowed. The journalist confirmed it later. The whole world had seen Ethan's downfall. His words, his rage, his attempt on my life. The empire he built on lies collapsed overnight. Weeks later, I stood at my wife's grave. I traced her name carved into the stone, the wind cold against my skin. I did it, love, I whispered. It's over. He can't hurt us anymore. My voice cracked, because even in victory, the cost was unbearable. I had destroyed the monster, but lost the son. As I walked away from the graveyard, I realized something. This story wasn't just about revenge, it was about survival, about dignity, about proving that no matter how far the darkness spreads, one spark of truth can still burn it all down. And that's what I leave you with.